classism and stuff that's inherent in this like kind of split between thinking about these things. The idea that like, at least to my ear, the idea that like high magic is that which we, do in our fancy robes and our fancy expensive, materials, and this is like to make us more divine, to get us more in touch with like this higher divine power, whereas like low magic or sorcery is like, ugh, gross, that's what you have to do and you have to pay the bills. Whatever you're doing, like whether it's making changes to make your living circumstances more supportable for doing that, maybe what some people would consider higher work, you have to start somewhere. Like, you're always creating changes, and I think that oftentimes, at least from my experience, creating like these things kind of come together. Like doing high quote and low quote magic oftentimes both result in both inner and outer results in the world and in yourself. Like I think that there's a sort of, for me, a little bit of I guess maybe like a little bit of a fallacy in separating those things.
To the Casual Temple. Our guest today is Luxa Strata, who is a fascinating artist and magician. Luxa is also the host of the Lux Occult Podcast, where there are discussions of a variety of occult topics exploring the intersections of magic, art, science, and philosophy through a chaos magic lens. The Lux Occult Podcast is also the audio home of the Green Mushroom Project, which is a group endeavor involving collaborative magical efforts exploring the boundaries of magic and intention. Luxa, I'm so happy to have you as a guest here on Casual Temple. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here. Stoked to talk to you about all this stuff. And enjoyed speaking with you for my show the other day as well.
Yeah.
So very excited.
Yeah, you're a great host. And I had a lot of fun. And you have just really good insights on stuff. Anyway, I'm super jazzed to talk with you again.
Right on. Well, I'm stoked to be here.
Yeah. Okay, so we'll just kind of dive in. And I know when we chatted, you had said that kind of starting the podcast was really sort of kicked off your own sort of spiritual or magical path. So can you kind of talk a little bit about how Lux Occult kind of did that for you?
Yeah, totally. Well, I've been like playing around with magic and stuff since I was a kid, but this was really like one of the first like huge things that I did with magic was kind of starting this podcast. I really wanted to create a space to talk about magic and occultism the way that I approach it, which is kind of heavily filtered through my own background in science, and also some art stuff and everything is mixed in there. And I wanted to have a way of meeting people with similar interests and things like that. And it's also been an interesting way to do some magical experimentation as well. But before I started making the show back in 2020, I'd always wanted to make podcasts. I'd been a long time enthusiast of talk radio shows like Coast to Coast AM and things like that. But I was always incredibly shy, and I really wasn't sure I'd be able to get to a place where I'd feel confident enough talking into microphones and doing this whole thing. I ended up doing a lot of magical work surrounding what we would call maybe reprogramming or repatterning some of the ways I was thinking about myself. And yes, as you can see, here I am now, or as you can hear, rather, making podcasts. I actually have another podcast that I make with my brother called Ad Hoc History, which is really fun. But I like to bring this story up when I talk about the show because I think it's a great example of the type of like personal development and things like that a magical or spiritual practice can offer. And if people want to use it that way, there's a lot of different ways to use it. But if that's something that people are interested in doing, doing something that you want to do, but you are afraid to do, or you have boundaries or whatever barriers are presenting themselves, for me, I was able to work with that in a magical way and found a lot of really cool stuff there. So I like to kind of talk about the show as being like occultism for everyone. Accessible to people who, even like me, might be coming from a little bit more of like a scientific background or might have some barriers surrounding like pursuing a spiritual or magical practice. I think a lot of people have a lot of like trauma surrounding spirituality because they are put into, kind of ritual contexts or other things, like in maybe like religious situations where they like really didn't consent to it. And what could be a really cool and beautiful experience if you consent to it and you want it, is, not maybe so much if you're, have it forced upon you. And so I think a lot of
Mhm.
people have some barriers surrounding that stuff as well. So yeah, it's a way to have a space to talk about this thing that has been such an important part of my life.
Mhm. Yeah, and it's so great too. And I love how your format is very unique too, because you have like two guests per episode.
Yeah,
And so that's really
I play
interesting.
around with it. I
Hmm.
sometimes do have two tests. I sometimes have one depending on, it's just me making the show. So it kind of depends on,
Right.
there's a lot of moving parts, but I like to,
Yeah.
kind of keep it fresh and stuff and keep everyone guessing and everything. So yeah.
So yeah, we did chat a little bit about, yeah, very much when you had shared um how you were kind of like the podcast was sort of coming into your own, is kind of how I was interpreting it and who you are. And I was like, oh my gosh. I was like, yes.
Yeah, I was
Because
not called Luxa before I started making the podcasts, really. Like that
what?
was part of that was, becoming, I had this idea of like the person that could make the shows. It wasn't
Mm,
who I was at the time, but I thought,
right.
here, this is what that person would be
Oh,
like.
so,
And
so
so,
good.
yeah,
Very magical for sure.
yeah.
Um, yeah. And then, yeah. So coming up with the podcast and then also, yeah, same thing of like, why like I also was a fan of podcasts. I think I started listening to them in like 2005, and the first one I listened to was one called the Ghostly Talk, and they're still around too. um but yeah, it's I was like, got the poke on the shoulder to do a podcast like a couple years ago, and I was like, I don't know. But then then asked for, okay, if I'm supposed to do this, like, what do I do first? Okay, what do I do second? What do I do,
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely.
Um,
Yeah, there was a lot of synchronous events that came together and yeah, interesting things. So yeah,
mm,
I've talked about this on the show a little bit, just kind of, meeting people and through
mm,
them meeting other people and I mean that's how
yeah.
it goes and
Yeah.
everything. So yeah, it all came together very organically and in a way that felt very magical, which I really
Yeah.
appreciate.
Cool. Oh, that's so great. So with sort of your path, did you have any support or guidance kind of along when you were doing this? It sounds like maybe some of the guests and people in your circle were
Yeah,
helpful
I mean,
there.
I've had a lot of support and guidance. I mean, yeah, it's kind of almost too much to name, like my family and friends. And
Oh,
I mean, the
yeah.
amazing folks at the Mushroom Crew are so awesome. Like I've got a lot of great friends over there. Got a
Hmm.
whole coterie of unseen magical helpers that
Mm-hmm.
support me. I've got a personal pantheon of deities and ancestors. And I mean, I've probably gotten some support from myself in the future too.
Hmm.
I don't know. Yeah, a lot of help.
Yeah,
So, yeah.
totally. Oh, I love that you brought up like the support of your unseen supports and your future self, because that's like, because a lot of people might think that they don't have any support, right? Meaning people
Mhm.
here, like in this
Sure.
material plane.
Yeah.
I love that you brought that up.
One thing that I started doing a while back when I was thinking about the idea of like time magic is a
Mm,
simple like meditation in the morning where like I think about, you know, myself existing in all these different times, but I kind of stand in
mm,
the
mm.
same place. I know I'm not actually in the same place, like the earth has moved and we're
Right.
all
Yeah.
careening through space at breakneck speeds all the time.
Hmm.
But similarly enough, this idea of kind of connecting with the past self and the future self
Hmm.
through the present self and sort of like reaching out to the future self for guidance and then also reaching back to the past self to offer it support and guidance and like, you
Hmm.
know, forming that relationship with yourself. It's like if I'm going to do this every day, I can count on myself in the future to be offering myself support. So it's almost like
Hmm.
even if you're sort of a scientific materialist, you
Right.
can still like say, well, that's actually for sure true happening because I'm making it happen,
Hmm.
which I think is actually a really cool way of doing magic is making things happen like that. So
Hmm.
yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that brings up a good point about making things happen. Um, because there's kind of a lot of, and I know you kind of, you're more of sort of chaos magic, so this probably doesn't phase you at all. But there's a lot of
Very
like,
little will.
yeah, I figured so. But there is a lot of like, at least in some of the circles I'm in, where there's, either Western ceremonial magic or stuff like that, and a lot of the things I do, not a lot, but some of the things I do are like theurgical and like considered high magic, right?
Mhm.
But not everything I do is that. Like I do
Sure.
material world stuff. So what is your perspective on doing magic that makes changes, and maybe even doing magic that makes changes for your material, either benefit or something like that?
Okay. Yeah, this is a great question. I think it's kind of complex and
Mm.
nuanced. And I think that in order to answer, I might have to tease apart some
Oh,
of
sure.
what I might consider a little bit of like classism and stuff that's inherent in this
Mm.
like kind of split between thinking about these things.
Mm-hmm.
The idea that like, at least to my ear, the idea that like high magic is that which we, do in our fancy robes and our fancy expensive, materials for,
Mm-hmm.
like, and this is like to make us more divine, to get us more in touch with like this higher divine power.
Yeah.
Whereas like low magic or sorcery is like, ugh, gross. That's what you have to do and you have to pay the bills. Like, yuck. Like that's for pores. I mean,
Yeah.
and I'm
Yeah.
not saying that that's
Exactly.
exactly like what the thinking is there,
Yeah.
but like
Yeah. Yeah.
I do think that like, you know, whatever you're doing, like whether it's making changes to make your, living circumstances more supportable for doing
Mm.
that, maybe what some people would consider higher work,
Mm-hmm.
you have to start somewhere. Like you're always creating changes. And I think that oftentimes, at least from my experience, creating like these things kind of come together, like doing high quote and low quote magic oftentimes both result in both inner and outer results in the world and in yourself. Like I think that
Mm-hmm.
there's a sort of, for me, a little bit of I guess maybe like a little bit of a fallacy in separating those things.
Mm-hmm.
I do a lot of what a lot of people wouldn't consider to be like theurgy and high magic and stuff like that. Like I'm very into playing around with like very old tech and kind of
Mm-hmm.
feeling out how it works and then adapting it for my own purposes. Like a classic that I've been loving to play around with for the last, I don't know, maybe 9 months or so is the headless rite. This is kind of
Mm-hmm.
like one of those classic things that everybody and their siblings love to
Mm-hmm.
play with. So like yeah, just a sort of I do a lot of deity work and stuff like that too.
Mm-hmm.
But I also don't think there's anything wrong with, people creating like using magic to create the type of situation that they need to support Maslow's higher things on the pyramid.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, beautifully explained. Yeah, I like that thinking too. And I like that nonsensely put together like what high magic is and maybe what people might think of low magic is very funny to me because it's kind
And
of
I'm
true.
not to like knock either anybody's
Oh, for
perspective.
sure.
I know that there's a lot of different ways of like approaching all this stuff.
Hmm.
And there's all kinds of magic that like I wouldn't, I'm not saying like I'm into doing all types of magic all the time. Like, yeah,
Yeah.
everybody should be discerning and think it through and make sure that, it's what makes sense for you and what feels right for you and all of the rest of it. So yes.
Hmm. Ah, so good. And I also like to think too, because in my practice, I look at and meditate on the Kabbalah quite a lot. And in the Kabbalah, it's very much, they hit it over your head so many times that Keter, which is the quote unquote highest sphere, and then Malkuth is the quote unquote lowest sphere where we're residing in consciously. They're
Mhm.
connected. They're very much connected. They're overlapped. So to me, it's like if you're making changes here, it's it's connected to the higher, exactly what you said. It's just
Yeah, I
like,
mean, if
yeah.
I'm not like a Western Hermeticism version of Kabbalah scholar at all or anything, but if I'm
Mhm.
not mistaken, it kind of exists on these like orders of magnitude. Like you've got the tree, and then it kind of leads to like another tree that's like,
Mhm.
so that makes sense that it would be connected, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
oh yeah.
So perfect. Now, so you kind of like laid this wonderful groundwork. Can you describe for people who maybe aren't very familiar with what chaos magic is, according to your own perspective?
Yeah, sure. So it's a highly individualized practice. I'll preface this by saying that. So every chaos magician is going to have a little bit of a different way of thinking about it and practicing it and all of that stuff. But I will give you a little bit of that in a nutshell, like from my own perspective.
Mhm.
This is something that I talk about on my podcast a lot. So if people are interested in learning more in depth, that's something that they can
Mhm.
get into there. There's a lot of nuance to all this.
Mhm.
Let's kind of start out with like a basic premise of my own, which is like, it seems to me that humans have a sort of like psychological infrastructure that's like set up for spirituality and ritual and things like that.
Mhm.
That's kind of like part of our secret sauce as creatures, if you will, I think.
Mhm.
And it seems like looking at history and all other places, this is something that often is co-opted by like authority structures or like con people or predators or whatever, to use it for their own means instead of the constructive means that it might otherwise be used for the individual. So a do-it-yourself approach to spirituality, I think, can help a person sidestep many of those issues with spirituality in general.
Mhm.
So chaos magic is something that's allowed me to kind of reconcile spiritual woo, whatever, and kind of hard scientific ways of knowing and understanding, like ways of putting these things together and synthesizing them like into useful tools and other things. So this is the context in which I work.
Mhm.
It can look a lot of, very similar to like a lot of modern, like eclectic witchcraft practices that we
Mhm.
see very commonly, where people have kind of taken what works from them from various systems or traditions and created their own like approach, their own kind of. I've heard people say like, this is my own personal religion and I'm the only person who practices it. And yeah, that
Mhm.
kind of thing, which is rad.
Mhm.
For chaos magic, some touchstones, like in terms of like praxis, like some people might think about are like sigil magic, hyper sigils, pop culture magic, things along those lines, but definitely not limited to it. I think a lot of chaos magicians like to explore a lot of really kind of old traditions just from a chaos magic perspective.
Mhm.
Um, so where it diverges from a lot of the like eclectic witchcraft practices that I described earlier is that chaos magic tends to be informed by a sort of like theoretical framework, which includes things like paradigms and magical models. Um, so in chaos magic, we're not ever really making like ontological assertions, if you will,
Mhm.
or like statements about like what for real is actually going on behind the scenes with magic. Like in some
Mhm.
traditions, they're like, oh no, for real, it's definitely this god. This god definitely exists, and they do this, and this is like what it is.
Right.
In chaos magic, it's like, okay, well, that's a paradigm. Like this is one way of looking at it, and in order to like play this game, I'm gonna, enter into this mode of thinking. But I'm also, knowing that this is still a paradigm, this is still a game that I'm playing. I'm not completely investing all the way per se, unless I'm actually in the moment doing ritual. That's when I'm
Mhm.
completely investing, and that's when I'm, using that belief, the idea that belief being something that can be used in intentional ways for magical purposes is kind of another little kind of key component of a lot of chaos magic practices. So
Mhm.
like rather than having this like fixed state of belief that like, oh yeah, like this is it for sure. It's just when I'm doing that ritual, like so when I'm for instance like praying to the goddess that I like to work with or whatever, like while I'm in that moment, like I'm really like letting it go, like really kind of surrendering to that. And then after I'm no longer in that, circle, that magical circle or container of ritual, I can step back to my normal, everyday agnosticism about
Mhm.
many things in the world.
Mhm.
So this is a way that I find really works for me, and it's been something that's been really useful for me. And it's also allowed me to gain a lot of different perspectives about a lot of different things, and I think
Mhm.
allowed me to gain a lot of empathy and just understanding about how the world works in general. So,
Mhm.
um, yeah, if nothing is true, everything is permitted, or because all truths are conditional, there might be infinite possibilities there.
Right.
So, hopefully, that's lucid enough to be
Oh
going
yeah.
on with.
Yeah, that's great.
All right, right on.
Oh, oh, it's making me think, oh, because you're doing so what you said, I like, I think this is why chaos magic, you know, was so groundbreaking when it hit years and years ago,
Mhm.
but is still like in very much existence today and probably getting more strong, is because of that freedom. And people, because human beings are curious, they want to explore and figure this out, especially something so important as like your relationship to what the heck you're doing here kind of thing.
Mhm. Yeah,
um
absolutely.
but I did have a question, since you do you interview quite a few people. Have any of your guests kind of influenced you in some way of like how you approach magic? You don't have to name names, but just curious.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I don't want to I don't want to name names because I'm very nervous that I'll accidentally forget
Oh.
somebody and feel like a total
Oh,
asshole because I've
totally.
spoken to some of people that I've been, yeah, I've gotten to meet some people that I've really looked up to and respected, and it's
Hmm.
been really, really amazing. And so yeah, I've definitely had the opportunity to speak to people that have been inspirations to me and who I've,
Hmm.
been like a huge fangirl of and stuff like that. So
Hmm.
yeah.
Cool. Okay, so I know one of the main things that you're working on is called the Green Mushroom Project. So I'm curious now. I have, I feel like when I have these questions, I have them backwards. But so if you can help the guests understand, or the audience understand what the Green Mushroom Project is, and then kind of what inspired you to get involved and start it.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think I'll start out with a sort of biological metaphor that inspired this in order to
Hmm.
describe what it is.
Yeah.
So maybe the questions weren't backwards.
Oh,
But
yay.
so if we think about the symbiotic relationship, like a relationship where both of the organisms are getting a benefit out of it, a beneficial symbiosis, that some types of fungi, the types that produce mushroom, have with some types of trees, a lot of these are conifers, but they're not limited to conifers. Um, there's this sort of really interesting thing that happens where the forest is kind of connected underground by this mycelial web that these fungi form. And it
Hmm.
allows the trees to kind of communicate with each other and to share resources. And it's not very well understood yet, but the more that we learn about it, the more interesting and, complicated it looks.
Hmm.
So there's this really interesting kind of biological metaphor that I wanted to play with there. So here with the Mushroom Project, if the magical practitioners are like these trees, the green mushroom hyphosigil is like the underground mycelial web, which
Mm.
connects us and supports us and allows us to, like, share resources and communicate and other interesting magical things.
Hmm.
The word hypho is from Latin for net, so it means web.
Hmm.
So it's a web sigil. It's kind of inspired by the linking sigil that the DKMU came up with a while back. It's a similar type of tech, only this one is for a different thing than the LS sigil was created for. But yeah,
Hmm.
very much inspired by that work. And we started it back in 2020. It's sort of a large scale ongoing, excuse me, we started it back in 2020 as a sort of like large scale ongoing group magical working,
Hmm.
which is focused on, like, as I said, building connections, right? Like the hypho web connects us.
Hmm.
A lot of this is like fostering creativity. Like there's a lot of creative people. A lot of the magic that we do is creative in nature,
Hmm.
and artistically based and things like that, where a lot of us are very into things like hyper sigils and stuff like that. We wanted to empower individuals to become more agentic through using magic and esoteric technology, kind of like I described earlier with what I did with my podcast and my name and all of that stuff. There's all kinds of things can be done with that stuff, and we wanted to have a space where people could, experiment with that stuff. And through this, we also wanted to build solidarity and kind of strengthen our position against hate groups, which is a
Hmm.
thing that unfortunately we see sort of in on the rise within occult and New Age circles
Mm.
and other places in our society. So
Yeah.
this was the case back in 2020, and it's still the case now. So yes.
Wow. Very cool. I love the concept around it and then how it's being implemented. And then how you're kind of using that sort of sounds like kind of like combined attention, right? And that's very powerful in magic is the attention and
Mhm.
focus, and especially around things that, as individuals we feel like we can't have an effect on, like,
Yeah.
So, oh, that's so
Yeah.
cool.
One of
Oh.
the things that we do is like every Friday night we light a candle with the mushroom sigil on it together.
Mhm.
And we say
Oh,
the statements Project of Resistance, which I'd be happy to read for you if you would like to hear
yeah,
it.
please.
Okay, right on. So this is the Green Mushroom Project Statement of Resistance, which we do read and then light a candle at midnight Eastern on Friday nights. We usually have it be a green candle, but we're not picky about it. Resist. Resist by maintaining sovereignty of the self. Resist by maintaining love of the self. Resist by maintaining fierce loyalty to love and pleasure. Resist with acts of radical kindness. Focus on the path to better times. Fuck yeah.
I like the sign off. That's great.
Yeah, we fuck yeah is kind of our amen.
Yeah.
Can I get a fuck yeah?
Yeah. I mean, it has like the same energy. That's awesome.
So you might have noticed, I know you're into planetary magic. You
Hmm.
might have noticed the planetary tie-ins here. We're doing this on
Hmm.
Friday nights. We've got
Hmm.
love and pleasure as part of it.
That's
So we've got a
right.
lot of Venusian energy going on here. We found that to be very helpful for like keeping shit chill and also for
Mm.
creative endeavors too. So it's been going very
Yeah.
well.
Oh, I like that. Yeah, you associated the Friday energy with creativity because why not? That makes sense. That's
I've
great.
found it to be a very useful energy for that stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, amazing. Well, good tip. I love it. Let's see. So gosh, you have so many things that you're doing. Um, the next one that I was like, oh, I don't know if I know this one so much, but it's I think it's on your Patreon, but it's called Project Specs.
Oh, yes, actually, this is very much related to the Green Mushroom Project because
Oh,
this
is
is
it okay?
this is a thing that Frater Damiana and Guillermo X have and actually Yaramura too. Some folks and I were talking about, wanting to do some kind of pop culture, political magic, and
Hmm.
this was something that emerged as being a really kind of fun and interesting thing to try out. So
Hmm.
Project Specs, specs as in like spectacles, it's sunglasses magic, which is
Ooh.
inspired by the 1988 film They Live by John
Oh, right.
Carpenter.
Uh-huh.
So for people who haven't seen this movie, it's a really great, really terrible movie. It's an old 80s action movie. It's yeah, it's very fun.
Hmm.
It is actually in the reason that John Carpenter, as far as I understand it, made it was so that he could talk about Reaganomics in a space
Mm.
where political discourse like wasn't super welcome. So in order to
Mm.
do this political discourse, he made this very cheesy action movie.
Wow.
And the premise is that the main character finds these sunglasses that when he puts them on, he
Hmm.
can see that there's been this like alien invasion and these aliens are kind of like taking over and they've got all this like subliminal messaging everywhere that's kind
Mm.
of like controlling people and enslaving them and stuff. And all of a sudden he can see all these like signs that say like obey, consume,
Right.
reproduce, like things like that. And so it's this sort of like idea of wanting to make our own version of these sunglasses that allow us to see through the subliminal messaging and all kinds of other, we're constantly under onslaught of different
Yeah.
um forces and different parties wanting to influence us, wanting us to, just our attention, our money, our
Hmm.
vote, whatever it is. Like, so just having some kind of a filter we thought would be an interesting thing to play with.
Ooh, that sounds so cool.
Yeah, and if people are interested, we wrote out the ritual, the simple ritual that you can do to create your own pair of enchanted specs glasses.
Ooh, awesome. Yeah, that sounds really cool. And I
Yeah, we've
love,
been having fun with it.
oh, it sounds so fun. What a great idea. Ah, and so I know you dropped, I haven't had another guest on that kind of talked about maybe his version of pop culture magic, but can you kind of give a little brief on what that is for the audience?
Sure. Oh, yeah,
Hmm.
absolutely. So I think that I would define pop culture magic as doing magic that instead of looking to like an archetype that we would find in, say, Greek mythology or the Bible or whatever other like big popular systems other people like to work with, we would take that from popular culture.
Hmm.
A sort of touchstone for this would be, I think this was the comic book artist Grant Morrison describing this concept, because this is something that he's written a lot about. The idea that Ares and Superman have a lot in common. And
Mm.
for modern people, some modern people might have a much closer connection with Superman, and Superman might mean a lot more, might have a lot more power for them than Ares does.
Right.
So using that same kind of energy just through a different like symbolic representation,
Hmm.
which would be one way of thinking about that. So I think that for some people there can be a lot of inspiration as well in pop
Hmm.
culture. I've found a lot of inspiration for things that I thought were cool and wanted to play with magically from reading fantasy novels. The work of Patrick Rothfuss has been an inspiration to me in my magical practice. I think
Hmm.
I'm not sure if he's a practitioner, but if I do think that he has a very keen instinct for magical thought.
Mm.
So yeah, things like that I would say are pop culture magic as well. But I
Yeah.
think, yeah, anything that uses um, pop culture things and elevates it to like a sort of place of um, magical relevance or whatever. I know that
Hmm.
people do like popular saints work or folk saints work with
Hmm.
people like David Bowie
Right.
or Ruth Bader Ginsburg or folks like that who have had a big influence. So Frida Kahlo is another one. Yeah.
Hmm. Oh. Yeah, I tend to think because you're for because I do the planetary magic for things around the sun. I know like kind of historically in the old texts they're like, oh, it's related to the king or whatever. I can't but picture just it's rock star energy. Like, I'm like the sun is rock star energy. So
I feel the same way about
yeah.
it. I mean, maybe the king is rock star energy too. I feel like
Yeah.
maybe the rock star is an easier archetype for me to
Yeah.
kind of get in touch with than the king. I don't
Yes.
know. The
Yeah.
king is someone who I just want to kick off the throne.
Exactly. Rock star, no way. I want to
I
stroke
want to
some
party
legs
with
or
that dude.
something. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yes. So yeah, and I like, because I think yeah, I definitely love music and stuff, so that appeals more to me. It's like rock star magic.
Absolutely.
Let's see. So I know so you have this other project called Autophilia. And so I could can you describe what that is for us? And what
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah.
So Audiophilia was a sort of collaborative audio sigil that
Hmm.
I've recently produced. I
Okay.
didn't create it all myself because I had a lot of help from several other ritualists.
Hmm.
I can read the kind of little thing that I wrote up to describe it to you, but it
Yeah.
might be the easiest way to
Yeah.
go
Yeah.
because it's kind of a lot. All right, here it is.
Sure.
After releasing my third album of ritually produced aural erotica, meaning sound,
Mm.
I wanted to find a way to offer others some of what I'd been able to take away from doing that type of work. So conducting it had been instrumental in allowing me to gain many valuable insights and had been the source of a lot, but not all of the personal growth that I'd undergone since beginning. So this is kind of related to some of that identity work that we were talking about earlier too.
Mm-hmm.
When I first shared the first track that I made of this leg of my work, this kind of out there audio work, in 2020, there was a lot of fear and other emotions
Mm.
associated with breaking the taboo that was gonna have to be done in order
Mm.
to share it.
Mm-hmm.
And when that happened, like it was a sort of altered state of consciousness, right? It was a sort of like gnosis, if you will.
Mm.
I'm not a huge fan of that term, but it is a popular term.
Yes, it is.
So that was a way to describe it. It was a really magically potent endeavor. And there's this idea that like fear and power are neighbors. And so if you
Mm.
want to find power, your power, if you start walking in the direction of your fear, that can be helpful. I'm not talking about doing this in like a way that is puts yourself in danger or anything like that, but in a way
Right.
that challenges yourself to like grow out of your own bounds.
Mm-hmm. Wow, cool. It's kind
So
of like a shadow work, right? In a
yes, a
way.
lot of
Yeah.
shadow work. Yeah, a lot of
Hmm.
stuff about dissolving shame. Within
Mm,
this project, we were working with like, sexual energy, and
hmm.
there the ritual that I wrote up for everybody involves like, kind of self-appreciation and self-love and self-pleasure and things like that.
Right.
And so it's a lot of like facing oneself in a very direct way, like sort of
Hmm.
being naked with yourself in a way
Right.
that's more than physical, I guess could be another way of describing it. So
Hmm.
within our culture, like the idea that like basic things like sex are bad and evil is been something that's been a very effective means of controlling people for a long time. And so I think a lot of us have a lot of stuff just built
Oh
up
yeah.
around that very simple concept. So just doing a little bit of work surrounding it can be a great way of finding a lot of like personal agency and liberation and stuff like that.
Hmm.
So yeah, that was that what was what that was about. And yeah, it was a really interesting project. I really appreciate that people were willing to like do this very out there thing and go on this very
Mm-hmm.
strange ride with me, to trust me with that work, to
Yeah.
send me these audio tracks of themselves conducting these rituals and trust me to put it together in a way that would be respectful and not, I don't know, do whatever weird creepy thing people do with it,
Right.
like
Oh my gosh.
so
Yeah.
yeah, it was really humbling and it really
Cool.
meant a lot to me to be able to like put this thing together. And I'm honestly still kind of unpacking it. We're going to be
Mm.
having a reflection meeting soon to kind of like talk over how it went for everybody. So it just
Hmm.
came out on Valentine's Day. It's very new and everything. So, but yeah, people can
Perfect.
check it out if they are
Yeah.
into listening to very spicy audio stuff.
Hey, every once in a while, you kind of want
Yeah, I
some
mean,
of that.
I'm obviously a fan. I create it, so.
Right. Exactly. Oh wow. And I love that you put a label on saying like shame, right? Because it's sort this kind of feeling or thing
Mm,
that we do to ourselves that we don't really talk about. Um
yeah.
and especially, as a woman in Western American society, it's just like you're constantly being shamed about all sorts of stuff. and,
You
and especially
basically
about
can't
that.
do fucking anything,
You
right?
can't do
Like,
anything
I mean, I'm not
without.
trying to be like an asshole about it, but that's like
No,
if
it's
you kind of
true.
break down the messages, it's like, okay, well,
Hmm.
so yeah, I was talking about this with a friend the other day, and she's like, well, if you can't do anything right, then fuck it. Like, just do what you
Exactly.
want to do. Just do you, like for real. Like that's the
Yeah.
only way out of that trap. So
Yeah,
yes.
exactly. Oh, so good. Oh my goodness.
Fuck yeah.
That's
And
awesome.
speaking about shame, like I do want to
Mm,
bring up somebody who was really important to me,
yeah.
Brene Brown, a great lot of great work about shame and
Mm,
thinking about the difference between shame versus guilt, and like, guilt being like, okay, I
mm,
feel bad about something that I did, right? Like that's
right.
something that's like measurable, but shame being like, I feel bad about like something that I am, and like, is
Oof.
that actually true, or is that just a story you're telling to
Mm-hmm.
yourself or whatever? So yeah.
Oof. That sounds great. Oh man.
Yeah,
I'm gonna write that down.
good stuff.
So I think, the next sort gosh, yeah, you are just in all the projects and all the things. It's awesome. How would you describe zodiacal pathworking?
Oh, okay, cool. Yes. So, playing around with planetary magic, as I
Hmm.
mentioned, I do like to play with, older tech as well as, doing sunglass John Carpenter rituals.
Right.
Um, I was, this is a couple years ago now here, but I was, noodling around with some stuff in the Picatrix and everything, and I kept seeing these references here and there to one's own nativity having like an effect on how these planetary
Mm-hmm.
operations would work, which absolutely makes sense, right? It's
Yeah.
all about circumstances and stuff like that. But there's not like a lot of, direction about like, okay, well, so how do you figure out what that looks like then?
Right. Yeah.
So, sort of my own personal meditative personal gnosis or whatever, like through this,
Hmm.
I would maybe it would be easier to say like my tutelary spirits or whatever showed it to
Mm-hmm.
me.
Yeah.
However you want to say it. I came across the idea, which was very much inspired by some of my friends who are into druidry.
Hmm.
they do something called OM pathworking, where they think about the OM views. OMs are like a magical alphabet, and they think about it as being arranged in a wheel. And they
Hmm.
kind of do pathworking around this wheel to explore the different energies of these views, these letters from this alphabet.
Hmm.
So thinking about it from a similar principle as that, I imagined the birth chart as having a same kind of like structure.
Right.
And I imagine myself, kind of standing there and using the birth chart like as a map for approaching where these planetary rulers like live
Hmm.
on the map. So hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
So to my mind, this was like a way of making kind of direct contact with these rulers, with these energies,
Hmm.
and sort of forming that relationship through the energies which they start through the energies which they first like approach you in, which I
Hmm.
guess is like the whole premise of what the birth chart is your starting context for working with these energies. So
Right.
yeah, through exploring this work, I was able to make some interesting kind of direct contacts with some of these rulers and, come up with some interesting like little tidbits and little like flavors that I've been
Hmm.
putting into my planetary magic. So, for instance, like after doing this work with, Saturn, for instance, like when I do Saturnian magic, I will do it within my own context of where it lives in Scorpio. So like I'll bring
Hmm.
some of that Scorpio vibe to my Saturn magic. When I do work with Mercury, I'll think about Aquarius, right? Like so just
Hmm.
things like that.
Oh, cool. Yeah, it's definitely like a way of approaching and sort of balancing out sort of the different energies that are present in your natal chart, sounds like.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think we talked about this on my show too.
Yeah.
One of the reasons I was playing with this too is because I had a consultation with a very talented friend of mine who's a great astrologer, and
Mm.
some of the things that he brought up in that were, it surprised me actually
Mm.
how well he read me.
Hmm.
And I really did want to explore maybe bringing some of the energies of like the malefics and stuff into like a greater harmony with everything. So yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah, working with those malefics in your natal chart is no walk in the park sometimes. So that's
Yeah,
awesome.
definitely. Yeah.
Wow, so cool. I'm like that's a really cool way of approaching your natal chart because yeah, I exactly what you were saying is like you have all this information about your natal chart, but you're like, but what do I do with it? And so that's a really good way of approaching it.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been cool, and I've presented on it a couple of times, and it
Hmm.
seems to have been going over well. The people who have played with it have had some interesting things that they've found too. So yeah,
Yeah.
it seems like people are at least finding some limited utility in it, and that makes me happy.
Yeah, hey, if it helps one person, that's cool.
Yeah, right on. I'll probably write something up on this pretty soon and put
Awesome.
it out there. Yeah.
Yeah, look forward to that. Okay, so the last project that I saw you probably have other ones that I wasn't
A lot of
aware
irons in
of.
the fire.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you probably have so many. But I saw that you do a paranormal collaboration project, or at least that's what
Yes.
I saw. What's
So
that about?
this is a new thing.
Mhm.
A friend of mine, Flood, over from the XV Planus podcast,
Mm.
and I are kind of going to be working on a little side project this year, which
Mhm.
is looking at like the intersections of paranormal practices that he's into.
Mm.
He's very into like ghost chasing and
Yeah.
doing CE5 work, like which is when humans reach out to extraterrestrials or aliens or
Mm-hmm.
extra dimensionals or however we want to think about
Sure.
them,
Yeah.
and try to make contact. And my perspective as like an occultist of like thinking about things like evocation and other
Mm.
things like this, and working together to see like, well, where are the intersections in these two communities, these practices, like how can we put this together, and how can we build, perhaps some useful tools that people could play with for doing work along these lines.
Mm-hmm.
So we're really excited about it. The first thing that we put out is a track which I produced. It's a magical track, a sound magical track,
Mm.
um, which was inspired by the events at Rendlesham Air Force Base
Oh
back in
yeah.
1980.
Oh, it's so yes. Oh, that's
So it's
awesome.
very fun. Yeah, it's the audio actually has like the music actually has like audio of Lieutenant Colonel Charles Halt at
Hmm.
the time. And he's like experiencing something very interesting and very
Yes.
weird. And so I don't want to like be that person, that like skeptic person that everybody hates, because like
Right.
um, I have like looked into this case and stuff, and like after like digging into it pretty well, like I do think that like it probably like the way that the ball first got rolling was like as a little bit of like a hoax on the part of the British.
Mm,
Um,
mm.
but after that, there's all these other things that come out of it, and it's been this huge inspiration to the community. And there's all this like lore that surrounds it.
Yeah.
It really is this fascinating and interesting thing. And
Hmm.
to me, like that's a very interesting magical story. Like it
Yeah.
doesn't like when we're doing magic or like other spiritual practices, like sometimes it starts out by just going through the motions. Like when I began doing my deity work, for instance, like it didn't feel like anything. Like I began
Mm,
because I
hmm.
wanted to know what it would feel like to even think that gods could be a thing. I
Yeah.
was like, what is that even like?
Yeah.
So it started out with me just going through the motions and going through the motions, and then all of a sudden there was a sort of catching that happened, and it became
Hmm.
very real. And I
Yeah.
think that that's kind of how these things happen. Like
Mm.
with it tells a very interesting magical story, Rendlesham does, because even
Yeah.
though it started out as a sort of a prank or hoax or whatever, that doesn't matter. Like
Hmm.
it has a sort of like feedback loop effect where it becomes something with emergent properties that has a life of its own.
Hmm.
And so yeah, that's kind of like what the track is about, Rendlesham, and then the other layer, the esoteric layer of it is about that for me.
Oh, wow. Cool. Yeah,
But
that's
yeah, people should
interesting.
check it out. It's on YouTube, and I did put some in the music video. I put some
Hmm.
of the things that like were supposedly communicated by the time travelers that
Hmm.
visited, and so
Yep.
yeah, it's very fun.
Wow, that's so cool. Yeah, it is a fascinating story. There's like messages, like you said, and oh
Yeah,
my gosh, it's symbols.
ornaments, all kinds
Yes,
of things.
all
Yes.
the things. So yeah, definitely gotta check it out. I gotta check out um this your paranormal collaboration project on Rendlesham Forest. It sounds super cool.
Yeah, and people, if they're interested in like, paranormal investigation and
Mm,
stuff, Flood over at the XV Planet show
yeah.
does a great job of like, leading a paranormal investigation team into doing these
Hmm.
things and then kind of dissecting it in the podcast. So it's very cool, like boots on
Ooh,
the ground work, and yeah, I love it.
yeah, that sounds cool. I like that sort of analysis. So that sounds really cool.
Hell yeah.
All right. So, wow, we talked about all the millions of projects you do, and or some of them anyway. But where can folks find more about you and learn about all the things that you're up to?
All right. Well, you can hear me on the
Mhm.
Lux Occult Podcast, which is available on most of the places you find podcasts, Spotify, Apple. It's also on YouTube
Mhm.
and yeah, the other places. I'm guessing there's more, Podbean, whatever other
Yeah,
ones.
all those guys. Yeah.
You can find the rest of my work on my link tree.
Mhm.
You can find the Green Mushroom Project at greenmushroomproject.com. And you can find me on Instagram at Lux Occult Pod and see all the strange things that I like to post.
I always find them fascinating as well.
Thank you.
Very interesting. Um, so definitely follow the Instagram if you guys are into the Instagram world.
Yeah,
Uh,
if you like that sort of thing.
yeah, if you like that sort of thing, for sure. So kind of the last thing, what words of wisdom would you like to leave us with today?
All right. Well, this is sort of a central theme for a lot of my work, so I think I'm
Hmm.
going to bring it up here.
Yeah.
A lot of us are conditioned to look to outside authorities for answers and direction. This kind of starts in our education experience for a lot of us. But when it comes to like magic, our own personal magical spiritual practices, there can be a lot said for doing as much work as you can to put yourself in that primary position of authority. No matter what type of fancy hat somebody might be wearing, what books they might have written or read, what clubs they might be a part of, or whatever other way people gain social or other status, no matter what, nobody can tell you how to do your own spirituality, your own magic better than you can discover yourself through actually doing the work. There's a lot of silly or manipulative people out there making all sorts of claims about all sorts of things. So I encourage everybody listening to always resist by maintaining that critical thinking and always looking to yourself to be the ultimate authority in your practice.
Reach. That's amazing. Yes, I love it.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Well, everybody definitely check out Luxa Strata and all her amazing things. Check out the Lux Occult podcast. Yeah, all sorts of inventive, very cool, empowering stuff that you do, and I love it.
Well, Marilee, thank you so much for inviting me here and allowing me the space to talk your ear off
Yeah.
about all the stuff that I've
Yes.
got going on. Really, really cool sharing it, and yeah, I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, thank you. My pleasure. Your support means the world to us. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please take a moment to like, comment, and share it with others who might find this content valuable. And of course, don't forget to hit that subscribe button to stay tuned for more enlightening discussions. Your engagement helps us grow, and we appreciate each and every one of you. Thank you for being a part of the Casual Temple community.